Let's open up to the book of Leviticus, if you would. I know each of you came this morning. You prayed on the way here. I pray that we have a sermon from the book of Leviticus. You've been waiting for that one for a while. The book of Leviticus. If you have it, you can watch on the side screens. If you don't, we'll have it up there. The book of Leviticus is a book of the law from the Jewish people. So it's a part of the Old Testament, the Old Covenant. It was the way that we were to get to God, and it was handed down through Moses, from God to Moses. And then really a lot of the book of Leviticus was carried out, at least in the first generation, by Moses' brother Aaron, as he was the chief priest, and he would carry out everything that was written in this book of the law. And to set the scene, God has taken his people out of Egypt. You may not remember this, but the people of God had been slaves to the Egyptians for hundreds and hundreds of years. And the current generation, all they had ever known is slavery. But God has taken them out of Egypt, and he has taken them away from their captors and where they've been slaves. But God knows that even though he's taken them out of Egypt, that there is still a lot of Egypt left in them. Have you ever noticed that about yourself, that there are some things that you struggle with, that you've kind of been a slave to, maybe even some sin that you've been a slave to, and God has taken you out of a place. He has taken you away from that sin. He has taken you away from who you used to be, but there's still sometimes underneath the surface a lot of that left in you, right? He's taken you out of a place of anger. Some of you have dealt with anger. You have dealt with anger issues in your life. You have felt the anger viscerally that boils up in you over certain subject matters, over certain people, over certain ways that things happen in life. But you walked away from that anger. There's some testimonies in here, I know it, that had anger passed down to them generationally. But you have walked away from that anger. But every now and then you realize, I know I left that place, but there's some of that place left in me. It happens to me every now and then in sports. That's where I figure out. See, y'all may not know this about me. You may not would ever guess this about me, but anger is my besetting sin. I can preach from an angry place sometimes. I can lead from an angry place. I can parent from an angry place. I can be a spouse from a friend from an angry place, a spouse from an angry, all those things. There's something every now and then that just boils up, and sports brings it out in me a lot. In fact, I coach in our Little League in Town of Mounts Corner. How many of you ever coached Little League anything? Basketball, football, any of that kind of stuff? You've coached it? And so my deal is, here's my only deal. I was talking with Becky, who runs our leagues in Mounts Corner, and she goes to our church, and I was telling her, I said, here's my problem. Becky, you can help me from sinning. Did you hear how I said that? I was like, you can help. If we'll just know the rules going into the league, and everybody will just play by the same rules, including the referees. Can I get an amen? If everybody will just play by the same rules, I won't sin. But I don't want to sin. And so every now and then you have this thing where it's like inside of you, and it bubbles up. Does anybody have some stuff that bubbles up inside them? And so it's anger, or maybe for you it's a little bit more serious. It's a place of abuse. Like you were abused, and you saw in yourself that you were starting to be an abuser in some way or another, because hurt people hurt people. You guys have figured that out in life, right? And so the abuse has been there, you know that, but it boils up. You're out of that place of abuse, but it boils up inside of you. And I could name anger, abuse, I could keep on going. I could just stay with A words, and I could just keep going for a long time. I mean, I could name something that hits you, but you know that thing. You know the visceral moments that you have. You know the moments when you feel it inside of you, and you're like, I didn't know that was still there. Especially when you've been walking with Jesus for a little while, right? And the Egyptian people had been taken out of a place, but God knew that place, a lot of that place was still inside of them. And so he gives them some rules to follow as a way to get close to him and be close to him. But also, it wasn't just to get close to him. It was to keep them inside of some guardrails and some ways to live life, because they had only known life as a slave. Some of you have only known life as a slave to sin. It's the only life that you know. It's all you've ever seen. It's all you've ever felt. It's all you've ever seen exercised in front of you and modeled in front of you. And so this whole idea of living outside of Egypt for you is hard because there's so many practices and customs of Egypt still inside of you. And so God gives them the Old Testament law in this book of Leviticus as a way of teaching them how to live outside of the hand of slavery. It is the process of developing them into who they actually are, the people of God, rather than allowing them to kind of operate and be driven by the decisions of who they used to be. Because we're like that. We're driven so often by decisions of who we used to be. Now, don't miss this. In that, discipleship is the process of bringing out what is already in you and actually is you and leaving behind the thing that God has called you out of and taken you out of. That's what discipleship is. And so Leviticus chapter 6, as we go into Leviticus, yes, it is the Old Testament law, and I want us to remember that. There's a lot about the Old Testament that has passed away because we are under a new covenant now. But there are things that we can learn about how God was teaching them how to be a free people. And in Leviticus chapter 6, he's doing that in verse 8. It starts this. It says, "Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Give Aaron and his sons the following instructions regarding the burnt offering.'" Now, it's important that we stop here just for a moment to teach just a little bit, because when we get into the Old Testament law, there's some things that we have to be taught. Like I love when people say, just read the Bible, just read it, and God will speak to you, and he will. Do not get me wrong. He will speak to you. But there's sometimes that we need to understand the context and the complexities in which the Bible was written. And so that's why we gather together as a church. That's why we do Bible studies together in small group. That's why we read books about the teaching of the Bible from scholars and people of wisdom, because sometimes you need some context, and I think that there's some context here that we need. First of all, when's the last time any of you gave a burnt offering? Right? I mean, we didn't come in today and go, hey, here's your supplies for your burnt offering, right? We're not doing that. So what is a burnt offering? Well, the burnt offering was a complete offering. So something you may not know, maybe you do know, is that a part of the sacrificial system that the Jewish people lived under is that they would sacrifice an animal to pay for their sins. And so that was the way. We have had the Lamb of God sacrificed for us. His name is Jesus, and he has paid for all of our sins. And so there's no longer a death that is required to pay for our sins, because Jesus' death paid for our sins in full. But in this time, they would sacrifice an animal so that there would be spilled blood, there would be death to pay for their sins. And so the burnt offering was they would not only just put the offering up on the altar, because they would do that often with sacrificial offerings, but they would not be burnt completely. But the burnt offering was burnt completely. So the difference is there's nothing left to the burnt offering. So other sacrificial offerings they'd put up, and they would what we would call cook them, right? And then they would even enjoy them or eat them. But the burnt offering was something that was completely used up, and it wasn't partially burnt. I think about that whole sacrificial system where they would get to put an offering up on the altar. It would pay for their sins, and then they would get to enjoy the meat from that offering in some circumstances. It's so much like what we get to do that we oftentimes call sacrifice, isn't it? Like we'll call something sacrifice. Oh, I have to sacrifice to serve, in the church, or I sacrifice to give generously, or I sacrifice to help this person out. But the truth of the matter is, if you've ever served, if you've ever given, if you've ever helped someone with your gifts, you know that the sacrifice very quickly turns on you to be a blessing, doesn't it? I mean, it's so like the people would put, oh, we got to sacrifice this animal to God, and then they get to enjoy it. But with the burnt offering, it was a little bit different, because with the burnt offering, it was a complete and total surrender. They took what they put on the offering, whatever it was, and they gave it completely and with total surrender, because it was going to be completely burnt up. The Leviticus chapter 6 verse 9 says, the burnt offering must be left on the top of the altar until the next morning, and the fire on the altar must be kept burning all night. I don't have time to preach this completely, but I loved reading about this because I was thinking about things that we need to completely surrender in our lives. things that we need to put up on the offering, and we need to go, I'm going to leave it there. But I remember one time hearing about how, we'll put things up on the altar, we'll give it to God, but we quickly take it back. Have you ever done that? Your prayer, God, would you just work in this circumstance? I'm giving it completely over to you. And what do? We take it back when we worry. God, I'm giving this completely over to you, this situation. I don't know what to do about it, God, but I know you're going to provide. Then we take it over by striving and trying even harder to solve it on our own. And I was thinking about that and reading this scripture, and I thought, there are just some things, there is a season in which it needs to be left on the altar, and we need to keep it there so that it can be completely surrendered to God. There are just some areas of your life that I think God is asking for complete and utter surrender of that thing, of that feeling, of that hurt, of that person, that process that came into your life, whatever it was. There's something that came into your life. You were thinking about it earlier, remember? The thing that boils underneath the surface of your life, like this ember that's there underneath the dark fire that's there, and it's kind of starting to just burn, and it's there, and you don't want it to, but that God is showing us we need to completely surrender it. For you not to grow weary in leaving it on the altar. For you not to grow weary and quit, so that the fire that needs to be burning wouldn't continue to burn. It says in the morning in verse 10, after the priest on duty has put on his official linen clothing and linen undergarments, he must clean out the ashes of the burnt offering and put them beside the altar. And then in 11, then he must take off these garments, change back into his regular clothes, and carry the ashes outside the camp to a place that is ceremonial clean. Meanwhile, the fire on the altar must be kept burning. It must never go out. Each morning, the priest will add fresh wood to the fire and arrange the burnt offering on it. He will then burn the fat of the peace offerings on it. And remember, it says, the fire must be kept burning on the altar at all times. It must never go out. I wanted to show you, and I know in Leviticus we get kind of caught up in some of the things that are there that are strange for us to understand, like the undergarments and the special clothing for the priests. And you can read all through and the symbolism that had on that, and you can find great commentaries on that. But what I wanted you to see in this is that I want us to talk about how we keep the fire going. Kind of alluded to that a little bit. That's where we're going. I want us to talk about the fact that there are some things that have to be put on the altar that have to be completely surrendered. I want us to talk about the fact that there are indeed some things that we put on the altar that just the aroma of them we get to enjoy in our lives, and all those are important. But I didn't want us to miss the fact that there are two things in here. One, there are some things in our lives that even in the process of sacrificing to God, or our lives and giving our lives to God, and in the process of being discipled into who He's called us to be, and in the process of learning how to keep the fire going in our lives, there are some things that also have to be removed. The ashes had to be removed. Why? To keep the fire going. The ashes, the priest would come out and remove them. There are some things in your life, if you are going to be made into the image of who God would want you to be and who He already knows that you are, inside of you, there are some things that are going to have to be removed. There are some things that have been sacrificed, but you've allowed the ashes, the residue to stay in your life. There are some things that Jesus has paid the price for, but you've allowed them to hang out in the form of a distraction. There are some things in your life that in order for the fire to keep burning, you're going to have to remove. And I want to talk to you this weekend on the subject, it must never go out. Did you hear that throughout that? It must never go out. It must never go out. That's what this new series is about. We're talking about embers. You can see I've got here on the stage, I've got a fire because there we go. Y'all can hear the fire going. So we've got a fire here, and we've all been around a fire in our lives. We've all felt the warmth of the flame. We've all seen the glowing fire, like when it's really burning, maybe around a campfire. But we've also seen the beauty of the embers that are at the bottom as it starts to get hot and they start to glow. And we've all been around a fire before, and that's what this new series is about. It's the embers. There's some embers that we need in order to keep the fire going. What did it say? It must never go out, all throughout that verse. But there's also some embers that we need to remove, some ash that we need to remove from our lives. And we've all sat around the campfire and seen the embers glow. And we know just instinctively, right? Every one of us, when we know that there is fire around us, we know that there is good fire and there's bad fire, right? In fact, when I told everybody around me and my staff and stuff, I said, I'm going to have a fire on stage. You could see the look in their eyes because they know there's good fire and there's bad fire. We've all experienced in our lives. And what I think the scripture is teaching us about how it can never go out is that we need to know that. We know to keep fire going, we have to tend the embers. We have to add fuel, and that's how the fire will keep going. And next week, I want to talk a lot more about what we do to keep the fire going in our lives. And I want you to commit to being here again next week because we're going to talk about what is it that you need to do to stoke the embers. How do you live out? It must never go out. And I'm going to talk to you about how you do that and tend that and add the fuel to have that kind of life where God's fire is burning deep inside of you. But we also know a huge part of tending the fire is managing what needs to go. What needs to go. In fact, I want you to ask yourself that in the form of a question. I want you to say it out loud with me with inflection on the end like it's a question. And I want you to turn to your neighbor to do it. And I want you to say, turn to your neighbor and say, what needs to go? What needs to go? What is inside of you? Turn to your other neighbor and tell them, what needs to go? What needs to go? We need to be asking ourselves that question. What needs to go? If you look back at verse 10 through 12 that we talked about, there is this idea that there are things that have to go. They have to be removed out of our lives. Part of the process of the burnt offering was removing the old embers and ash. In fact, what I would say is a huge part of re-embering, keeping those embers going in our lives, burning the fuel, is not just knowing which embers to tend to keep going, but it's knowing not only what to re-ember, but what to remove from our lives. And I want to help us to look at that. I know you've had this happen before. You make a comment, and when you make the comment, it was intended to kind of be funny. We all do that, right? To make, kind of make things easier around people when things are going weird or whatever. So we have these comments that we'll make, or you made it to kind of make a point passively, aggressively, or whatever. Or you just made the comment instinctively. You just made the comment and didn't really think much about it. But when in that very moment, or maybe just a moment soon after, you make the comment and you have this place where God takes your own words to convict you of something that you need to deal with below the surface in your life. By the way, here's what we call this. This is called Holy Spirit working in you. You're like, man, before I allowed Jesus to save me, I used to make these comments all the time, tell these jokes all the time, say what I wanted to say to people and how I wanted to say it and all the things. And then it never bothered me at all. But ever since I committed my life to Jesus, put my life on as a living sacrifice on a burnt offering to say, God, I am yours, completely surrendering to you. Now when I make these comments, I always have this conviction. I always feel this conviction in my life. And so we've all had that happen before where we do that. And a few weeks ago, we were working through some things here at the church. I think it was related to just like the building project and the banking and all that kind of stuff. And it's been a long and arduous kind of process to begin with. And something had gone awry. Something had happened that was not really the best case scenario. How many of you have built a house before, built a business before, and there's just a lot of times where the best case scenario doesn't work out. In fact, I would say most of the time the best case scenario doesn't work out. And so that had happened. There had been this place where something had happened, and it was taking longer, or it was more difficult or more expensive. I don't remember what it was. And one of the staff members, they said, oh man, I know that has to make you angry. And I said, here's what I said back. I said, you know what? There's always an ember just below the surface of anger that is ready to explode. And we kind of just laughed and moved on, and about 45 seconds after we moved on, I realized, like, God said, there's something beneath the surface. There's always an ember just beneath the surface of anger. And when it comes to this project especially, and it's not hard to stoke the fire. It's not, have you ever said that? It's not hard to get me going about that subject. It's not hard to make me feel feelings about that person. It's not hard to get me going about them. It's not hard to get me riled up about work. Now, you start talking to me about work, you start talking to me about politics. Come on, I should have heard some amens. I mean, you start talking to me about controversial issues, and it's not hard to get something riled up. It's right beneath the surface. Have you ever thought about the embers that lie just beneath the surface of your soul? I mean, just right. You might say this. I'm always just on the verge of panic. Worry, panic, anxiety. It's just always feel like I'm always on the verge of panic. It's an ember just beneath the soul. I'm always, there's just something red hot right below the surface that's always ready to just burst into some tears. Look at those red hot embers there. And I'm just always ready to just burst into tears over something. I'm just always a little bit sad. I'm always just there with depression. It's just, you never know what's going to just something there that's right below the surface, and it's just right there. I'm always, my thought life, I'm just always there. I mean, I can't, if I see the wrong image, if something pops up on the phone, if there's a magazine in the waiting room, it's just something always there right beneath the surface that is ready to take over my thought life, you might would say. And what I want to tell you is that in order to keep the fire going for God in your soul, good fire, right? You're going to have to manage the embers beneath your soul that have needed to be removed. In fact, you're going to have to do the hard work of removing some of them. In fact, here's what I want to do. I'll say to this in a much more life-giving way. There is a way to live your life in which the embers that are right beneath the surface can be the ones that stoke a fire for God and don't have to be the ones that stoke the life that you used to live. So I'm trying to give you some freedom this weekend. So I think sometimes we get up here, and I love that our church is like this. We get up here and we talk about forgiveness, which we have. We talk about grace, which we will always have because we need it ourselves. And we talk about those things, and sometimes I think we give ourselves a free pass on not dealing with the embers that are right beneath our soul, that are ready to explode into a flame that can destroy relationships, that can destroy days. How about that? Can we just have some freedom from these embers that actually destroy just whole days of our life? We don't even live that many days, right? Why do we want to allow this ember beneath our soul to just destroy us? And I'm going to tell you, God has shown me in the past couple of years that when you can remove those embers, there is a freedom to be found. When you don't allow the things that, hey, and here's the deal. Look, this is what I know. Every one of these red hot coals that are there below the surface aren't necessarily ones that you put there. There are some people who branded you with the embers that they've put in your life. I realize that sometimes dealing with stoking the fire and dealing with embers, that you're dealing with garbage that somebody else brought into your life. I understand that some of you would even say the people that were supposed to protect me the most are the people who brought the most pain into my life. I understand that when I said the word abuse, it's a trigger word for some of you, that others of you don't even imagine and can't even realize what that means. But when I just said the word abuse, that there is a hot coal beneath the surface in your life that immediately causes your soul's temperature to rise, and you viscerally feel it when I talk about it. I understand that, but I'm also here to tell you that there is a God who came to give you freedom, and that you can deal with the embers beneath the surface. You know the ember is there, and though it may not be currently aflame, you also know that it could burst at any point. And that moment for me, God reminded me to be careful what lies on the fire of my soul. Because isn't it interesting, really, our lives, our souls, are where we put the sacrifice, the burnt offering, the discipleship. We lay it in our lives. How else do you grow but through your own life? How else do you grow but through your actions? And so, yes, it is dependent upon the Word of God and Holy Spirit, but where we see it come to fruition is right there in our very souls. And so the way that we tend our souls is really the way that we tend the fire that's in our lives. And I'm reminded of what David said in Psalm 39, verse 1 through 4, because I kind of felt like David when I'm convicted in this way. It says, I said to myself, I will watch what I do and not sin in what I say. How many of you have said that before? Easier said than done, right? I will watch what I do and I will not sin in what I say. I will hold my tongue when the ungodly are around me, David said. But as I stood there in silence, not even speaking of good things. So he said, I didn't even talk about good things. I just was silent because I knew if I spoke, I couldn't say anything good at all. So he said, I just didn't even talk. But he said, the turmoil, the embers within me even grew worse. And the more I thought about it, the hotter I got, igniting a fire of words. Lord, remind me how brief my time on earth will be. Remind me that my days are numbered, how fleeting my life is. See, sometimes to remember means to remove, but oftentimes remembering, David says, means to remember who you are, whose you are, what you've come from, how much life is, and going, I got to get rid of this thing underneath my soul because I need to remember the days are numbered. I won't let my days be ruined by this. I won't let me have to sulk for 3 days every time I see that person having a good moment. I won't let that happen in my life. I gotta let the embers go out. See, the thing is when I remove the ember, there are some things that just need to be removed. I don't care if I get down here to the hottest ember. If I remove the ember, eventually it will cool. It will no longer have power over me. It will no longer be able to control me. It will no longer be able to change my life. Because I just got to take it off of and say, this is not mine anymore. And here, why is it that you can remove it? Why is it that when you tend the flames of your soul, you have the power to remove it? Because it isn't you anymore. It isn't you. You say, but I feel that pain. I feel that hurt still, and that hurt was to me, Pastor. You're saying it isn't me. They hurt me. They abused me. They betrayed me. It's real. You say don't take it personal, Pastor. I got to take it personal because it was me. I'm not saying don't take it personal. Take it very personal. Take it so personal that you realize they don't give a flip anymore. And take it so personal that you go, I am dealing with something that's in my soul. And I'm going to deal with it. And so David says, I had to realize there was something that I needed to remember, and that removing the things that draw you away from God and placing them on the burnt offering so that they'll go away forever. So there are some embers that need to be removed. And they have been sitting and ready to be stoked for too long. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1 says it like this. He says, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. The embers are there, but the result of the heat in your life is the sin. The embers need to be dealt with. And let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. In fact, would you just indulge me just for a minute while I paraphrase that verse to kind of go with our series just a little bit? This isn't the scripture. This is just me paraphrasing it, but I would say it like this. Let us take away the embers that could engulf us, especially those that so easily get stoked Oh, it doesn't take me long to get wired up. It doesn't take me long to get fired up over that. Let us burn bright for God, and that fire, good fire and bad fire, it must never go out, but let's not burn ourselves in the process. Tending the fire of our souls. So how do we do this? Well, let's talk about embers. Because we also know that an ember can lie below the surface of an old fire and can be used to reheat the fire. We've all done that before. You've come and been the first one to wake up when you're camping. Not me. I'm never the first one to wake up, and I really don't camp. So, but you know, we've been there before. I've been on several occasions in my life. Probably I can count on one hand. I've been where you're the first to come out and you find that there's still this red hot ember underneath the surface of the fire. And if you'll just stoke it, you can get the fire to burn again. It's kind of amazing, isn't it? Like you're like, oh, this fire looks like it's out, and you can stoke it, and it begins to get on flames. Again, you can add some fuel to it, and you can reheat it. And we all know that that ember can lie below the surface that can be good like that. We also know that an ember can lie below the surface of an old fire and cause much harm. Here's the difference. In my smoker, my egg smoker, if I can get the embers just right, the product can be burnt ends. Somebody give me an amen. Woo, Lordy. If that ember is left at a campfire, it can be the result that the Yosemite, thousands and thousands of acres, burns down because someone left one ember untended to. See, there's a difference. Good fire, bad fire. Good embers, bad embers. There's a difference. And there's two things really, two areas that I think we can really zone in on for just a moment as we wrap up, because this is what's going to give you the application. Like, how do you tend the embers? How do you know what to remove? How do you do this? And there are two little areas that I think are just so important to knowing how to tend these embers in your soul. The first area is it secret or known? The most dangerous sin, the most dangerous ember that lies beneath the surface is the secret sin. James 5:16a says, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. It's the embers that we can't see that can hurt us. When I was probably 8 years old, I spent a lot of time at my grandmother and grandfather's house. They had this huge backyard, and I would play a lot in the backyard, and I would throw the football up and catch it and run around and pretend I was playing football. I had the basketball out there. They had a large backyard, so we had all kinds of stuff going on. And that day and time, this was pretty regular occurrence. It's not as much now, but people would just burn fires in their backyard, right? So we would just, right in the town amounts corner, whatever, you just burn fires. And so my grandfather would always have this big fire that he'd burn the leaves that he would rake up, and he'd put limbs that he'd cut away, and so he would burn that fire. And it was always like this little area in the backyard where that fire had been burnt, was going to be burned. It was just like the little burn area, right? And so one day he had burned a fire, raked up some leaves, put some stuff in there, and he had burned that fire, and it had burned down over like several hours, maybe even a whole day. And I was in the backyard playing, and it wasn't abnormal at all for that ash pile to be sitting there. And I threw the ball up, and it kind of tumbled over here. And so I went to go walk just across the ash pile to get my ball, like I would have done so many other times in my life, not knowing that there were some secret embers beneath the surface. And I had on some Chucks. Y'all remember Converse Chucks? Coming back now, they're real chunky. You've seen those? And so these Converse Chucks I had on, and I walked across that. And by the time, it was a big burn pile. So by the time I got to about the middle of the burn pile, like where I had go this way, it was the same distance to go this way, I realized something very, very bad was happening, that my Converse were melting. That the bottom of my Converse were melting. And now I've always had a little bit of a thing for shoes, so this upset me because my Converse were melting. But not only that, I realized they had melted to the point where I could feel the heat and the melting going into my soles of my feet. And I was literally destroying my soles of my shoes, going across, and of my feet. And I could feel it, and I got across. And I learned in that moment the danger of a secret ember, of one that you don't know about, one that you didn't know was hot. And all of us know there are good fires, there are bad fires, but we've got to keep an eye out for the embers, the dangerous embers in our soul that we know about, but nobody else knows about. That we haven't talked to anybody about, that we haven't gotten counseling about, that we haven't told a friend, hey, I'm ashamed that I feel this way, but this is the way I feel. And I want to get rid of this ember in my life. It was the ember that I could not see that was the most dangerous. It was the ember that I could not see that destroyed my soul. And if we're not careful, we don't have somebody. Let me ask you this question. Do you have somebody in your life who knows everything about you? Everything. Do you have that person in your life? Do you have a group of people who help identify the areas in your life where you need healing from past wounds? Do you have that group? Do you have that person? Because it's the difference between a life burning for God or a life burning out of control, and what we end up with is not destroyed souls, but destroyed souls. The embers that are not known can destroy your soul because no one is in your life to help you give the healing that is there. So that's the first series. Secret or known. The second one is a little more practical in that I think it's an everyday thing. It's something we just got to decide. We got to wake up every single day. It just takes one step, right, to be secret or known. You just need to let one person know. And I'm not advocating that everybody in the world needs to know every single one of the embers that lie beneath your soul. I'm telling you there needs to be at least somebody who knows. But the next one's a little more practical in that I think it's a daily discipline. Starve or feed. Here is a secret about life that can be so helpful in every single area of your life. I mean, it is applicable and helpful to every single area of your life. What you feed will live, and what you starve will die. It is a part of nature, and it is a part of the nature of your soul. What you feed will live, and what you starve will die. I love Romans chapter 13, verse 14. It says, but put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh to fulfill its lust. Now, when we read that verse, I think oftentimes we hear provision of the flesh to fulfill its lust, and we immediately go towards the lust that we kind of think of, whether it's pornography or whether it's sexual sin or whether it's the lust for more things and more stuff. But honestly, the provision for the flesh and the lust that we have, some of you, I know it's hard to admit this, but you lust after worry. Like that's your sin. Some of you lust after anxiety. You would say you hate it, but there's a part of you that really is used to it. It's something that it comes very quickly, and this is how you handle things. Some of you lust after anger. You can't wait to get on Facebook and read the latest conspiracy that your friends have put up, and either you're mad about it or you're sharing it, whichever side you're on. But you love it. You're clicking on the anger porn. That's what I call 24-hour news. And you're just clicking it on to watch it because you lust to feel that anger inside of you. And so it says, don't make any provision for the flesh. I get this word, the provision. What do you think of? It's providing, right? It's providing food for the soul to eat or for the sin to eat. And so are we going to starve it? And so what I'd say is to make it very practical. No Instacart order for your sin. That's what we do, isn't it? Because it's gotten so easy now to order food online. We love Instacart. Can somebody give an amen for Instacart? I mean, it's just incredible. But we have these Instacarts inside of our own soul, and we just click and go, I want a little side of anger. I like this brand of worry. I'm going to put myself in this situation over here, which just gets up all the lust inside of me. And so I'm going to stoke the fires. But not only that, I'm going to make sure that that I should be removing is actually getting the right amount of oxygen that it needs, and I'm actually going to put some more fuel over beside it because I'm not going to starve it. If you want to get rid of something in your life, you got to starve it. At times in our life, Connie and I have been very good at doing that and showing that with plants. Yeah. Every now and then people will give us plants, and we're like, oh, they gave us a plant so that we could kill it, right? But Connie got these new plants, and they're really cool. Like, they sit on our front porch, and she was like, I'm going to keep these things alive. And so she got these bulbs that keep water in them, and she puts the water in them, and she feeds them. I see her, like, every couple weeks, she's getting feed and putting fertilizer, whatever you call it, and she's putting it in there, and she's keeping it water. And these things have stayed living for so long, and they're beautiful. What's the difference? Feed it, starve it, right? You got to decide which one you're going to do. Are you going to feed it, or are you going to starve it? And so you starve it. How do you do that? By keeping it away from your time. If you give the very thing inside of you that explodes in you time by not keeping busy with other things. So you can't just remove something, right? You have to put something else in its place. You can't remove an old habit. You got to get a new habit. You can't remove an old, just remove the sin and not backfill it with something else. And so you've got to decide, I'm going to keep busy doing the work of God. In other words, I'm going to tend the right flames in my life. I'm going to tend the right fire in my life. I'm going to keep the red hot coals for God going. And when I do that, it won't allow time for other things in my life to take over. You starve it by keeping busy with the things of God. You also starve it of emotional energy. Oh, man. One of the greatest lessons you can learn in life is how much you have physical energy and you can feel tired that way, but you also have emotional energy. And you only have so much of it. And so when you're hurting, angry, lonely, tired, bored, or just curious, don't feed the flesh. Oh, man, I'm just sitting around thinking, so I'm gonna go on to Instagram, and I'm going to see how everybody else's filtered life makes my real life look so, and then I'm going to start to complain, and then I'm going to think that they've got all these friends that I don't have, and they're sitting around doing all these things that I'm not doing, and so we feed it with that, and we're taking emotional energy to worry about something that's not even true, but also then depletes us of our emotional energy, and when we do that, things explode on us. Don't allow your feelings to drive you. Allow your faith to drive you. I want to say just a small word about this because we are a church that really does understand mental health. We understand it, we acknowledge it, and we preach about it and the need for getting help with mental health. And I understand it's a real thing that people deal with. But I also remember talking to my friend, Pastor Cody Burbidge, who used to be on staff here now, is a pastor at a church in Boise, Idaho, and we were talking one time about his anxiety, and he deals, and he's spoken so publicly about it with some major anxiety issues, clinical anxiety, and he said, you know, the complex thing, though, is that I have to understand that in the same, I do have clinical anxiety, but I also have just sinful worry. I have clinical anxiety, but I also have things that God has called me in my life to be stretched, and it causes good stress. I have clinical anxiety, but I also have some things that I just don't want to deal with, and so it makes me anxious. But the fact of the matter is, I need to push through and deal with those things and not. And so all I'm saying is, yes, we're in this with you, and we know that there are mental health issues, and we want you to have mental health, but there are also just some hard things in life that we have to push through. And getting rid of the embers that so easily blow up in your life is sometimes one of those things. Dealing with our anger is sometimes one of those things. Allowing your feelings not to drive you is sometimes one of those things. And so we have to tell our feelings that they have to submit to our faith. So wait a minute, this ember in my life, it wants to take over right now, this ember of feelings in my life, but I'm going to make it submit to faith by putting it on top of the altar, not below it where it fuels it, but on top of the altar where it submits to God and my faith. And so I'm complete surrender in everything that I am. I'm going to do that. So what's my sermon title again? It must never go out. In fact, for your fire that's in your belly for God to not go out, you're going to have to go, but I need to know what needs to go out. In order to keep the only one fire that should be going in your life, you're going to have to allow some things to leave. I want us to have a response time now, but I want to take some time just to teach through why we do response the way we do it and some of the stations that we have available for you. And the first is, number one, I'd like our ushers, if they would, to come, and they're going to pass our offering at this time. And I just want to thank you guys for being generous. The life change that's happening in this church is so backed by you and your generosity, and you guys are amazing. And so as our ushers come forward, we're going to do that as a part of our response time. They'll be passing a bucket, and if you gave online, thank you as well, as most of you actually do. And it's a response to us. We go, and in fact, sometimes there's an ember beneath the surface that is called selfishness and greed, and the greatest thing to combat that is to replace it with generosity. So I pray that that might be your response today, and we'll all give so that we can be a part of exercising that in our lives. The next response station we have is the candles. And I thought today, for some of you, you would say, there's a fire that used to burn in me for the things of God, for the ways of God. There's a fire that it was palatable in my life. Maybe you want to go light a candle today just to signify I'm relighting that fire. I'm lighting that fire again in my life. And then we also have our communion. The only reason that we have the ability to stand before God and say, I make my life a living sacrifice is because the body and the blood of Jesus that was spread. And so communion at Freedom Church is open to each and every one of you who have allowed Jesus to save you. So I would love for you to go during our music, during a song of worship, just to go and take communion. You can take it as a family, pray together as a family. And then we have our prayer teams all around. Maybe you just need to be prayed for. They would love to pray for you, by the way. It is the joy of their life to pray for you. And they would love to do that. If you're nervous about it, just walk over and say, would you pray for me? That's all you have to say. Would you pray for me? Would you pray for me? And then I had one more response. So here at the foot of the stage, there's some embers. And here's what I'd like you to do. And I want all of us to do this. All of you you've been reminded today that there's something beneath the surface for you, right? There's something there for all of us. We're all dealing with something. But what if you were to take this as a reminder that God has called you to freedom in that? And you'd come to the stage, and what I'd love for you to do is just on your way back to your seat, don't go straight back to your seat. Just go over to the crosses. It's a part of our response. And I know there's going to be a lot of people and a lot of people moving. Just get as close to the cross as you can. And just say a prayer and say, God, you have dealt with this. You've taken it away from me because of your sacrifice on the cross. And this is no longer me. And so would you allow it not to sit below the surface anymore, but would you give me healing? Would you give me victory? And would you let me carry this ember out? I want you to take this with you. Carry this out, remembering that you have removed this from my life. I think it's going to be a powerful moment for you. A lot of you, sometimes you feel nervous about participating, I know, in things like this, but I just want to encourage you to, again, do hard things, step past your feelings, and say, I want to do something that's just a symbol of what God's doing inside of me. God, would you allow us as we worship you today to be made known, that area in us, just like you showed me the area in me that I'm working on, would you make known the area within us that there is an ember beneath the surface that could so easily destroy our souls? Would you allow us to deal with that? God, as we respond to you through communion, we respond to you through the cross. God, just remind us of whose we are and who you are. In Jesus' name, amen.